Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some interesting poetry that I have experienced in the wilds of the literature forest. Kind of a weird way to describe it. But, today's poem is all about the feeling that you are drowning and what seems to be longing for another person, at least from my perspective of what I gained from the poem. I am referring to Echo by Pura López-Colomé. For those who don't know, Pura López-Colomé is a Mexican writer and a literary critic. They've been writing for about 20 plus years now. And they've written some books of poetry, and won a few awards for their work. They're also a translator, presumably translating other works into the Spanish language, or maybe Spanish into English. I couldn't find specific information on that, but it's certainly interesting. But something to note about this specific poem is that it's actually translated by a person named Forrest Gander. And so the poem that I'm going to be reading to you is the reason I picked it is because it sounds really good. It's a really high quality poem, but it is a translation. So, it's probably best to find the original, Spanish language poem and read that in order to get the full meaning of the poem. Which you sometimes lose with translations. However, I don't really feel like anything's been lost here, because you definitely get a good understanding of the emotions of the original writer. So without further ado, let's talk about Echo. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. The poem actually begins with a section of an Emily Dickinson poem. It would not sound so deep were it a firmamental product. Airs no oceans keep. And so this is Echo. Afloat between your lens and your gaze, the last consideration to go across my gray matter and its salubrious deliquescence is whether or not I'll swim, whether I'll be able to breathe, whether I'll live like before. I'm caught in the bubble of your breath. It locks me in, drives me mad. Confined to speak alone, I talk and listen, ask questions and answer myself. I hum, I think I sing, I breathe in and don't explode. I'm no one. Behind the wall of hydrogen and oxygen, very clear, almost illuminated, you allow me to think that the root of the wind is water, and the atmosphere smells of salt and microbes and intimacy. And in that instant comes the low echo of a beyond, a language archaic and soaked in syllables and accents suited for re-transforming, giving light, giving birth to melanin hidden within another's skin, the hollow echo of the voice which speaks alone. So that was Echo. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about with this poem. In terms of narrative, it's a bit difficult to understand what López-Colomé is really talking about in this poem. But you can interpret it in one way as the narrator sort of feeling like they're drowning, but they're drowning because of their thoughts of another person, either someone they lost recently, someone who was pretty close to them, maybe a romantic companion. I think that's my interpretation. I think they were in love and they lost that love, and now all they can think about is this person, and it makes them feel like they're drowning. And they talk to themselves, but they can only hear their own echo. Whether or not that's literal or just a metaphor of them trying to talk to other people, but no one can quite understand their situation, so all they're hearing back is themselves. That's an interesting sort of interpretation. I think that's probably what's happening. And so you see a lot of references to drowning in this poem, and that's indeed what Forrest Gander says in their author's note, how this likens to the feeling of drowning. You see it in the first verse, but they say, whether or not I'll swim, whether I'll be able to breathe, whether I'll live like before, I'm caught in the bubble of your breath, it locks me in, drives me mad. And then behind the wall of hydrogen and oxygen, which, hydrogen and oxygen mixed to form water, very clear, almost illuminated, you allow me to think that the root of the wind is water, and the atmosphere smells of salt and microbes and intimacy. Salt and microbes, that's the beach, that's a watery feeling. But what's also interesting is the root of the wind is water, which is an interesting phrase, but it also references the Emily Dickinson poem from the first verse, where she says, "It would not sound so deep were it a firmamental product, airs no oceans keep." And so what I think that means is that maybe this hurt, maybe this feeling would not, feel so deep. Maybe the echo of my own voice would not, echo. Were we on dry land? Were we on a firm place where we can gather our bearings? But because it feels like we're drowning in an ocean so vast, the echo, it's all we hear. We can't hear anything else but that echo. We're all alone in that. So that's an interesting aspect of connecting this poem to an Emily Dickinson poem, and I always give extra credit when people reference Emily Dickinson, because Emily Dickinson is one of the greatest poets alive, if not my favorite poet, or one of the greatest poets of all time. Not alive; she's not alive anymore, but like just one of my favorites, probably the favorite of all poets. And so you really get an insight into the feeling of drowning, the feeling that you're trying to talk to people but nothing comes back. And you especially see that in the last verse of this poem, where the author says, "And in that instant comes the low echo of a beyond, a language archaic and soaked in syllables and accents suited for reedy transforming." Reedy transforming isn't a real word. It's just like mixing and matching the words to so they don't sound like they originally did. And then it says, "Hidden within another skin, the hollow echo of the voice which speaks alone." Again, getting to the ultimate feeling of this poem, of being alone, of not having that person that you maybe want to be with, and all you're doing is talking to yourself. You might be around other people, but they could never understand that feeling that you're going through. And so it just feels like you're a solitary creature alone in the ocean, not really connected to anything, and it feels like you're drowning. And will you be able to breathe again? Will you exist like you were before? Because that's a very familiar feeling, not having that person that you maybe love. Like, will I be the same I was before when I was with that person? And sometimes the answer is no. We always change. We always become different people when we're no longer around certain individuals. So kind of a very somber note to this poem. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Echo by Pura López-Colomé. A pretty solid poem, definitely getting at some very deep and very primordial, like primal type emotions of like loss and suffering in that loss. It's been a major theme of a lot of poems I've talked about recently, so that's probably something worth examining. I feel like that's important for anyone. If you read a lot of the same poetry and it's dark or sad, like maybe look inward and whatnot. As a man, I'm not allowed to express emotion, so I'm not allowed to really look inward. That's a joke, of course. But definitely something worth exploring in me. And I definitely recommend that you go out and read it and really experience this poem. I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and have a conversation about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this poem or this poet if they don't already know. Always good to learn more about international poets. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and hopefully not feeling like you're gonna be drowning travels, but those types of travels. Farewell.